Hey everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Today we are back with Avalanche. If you like the content, consider leaving a like. And with that said, let's get straight into it. So zooming in at the recent price action, we can see that basically ever since the end of Q1, back in March, we got this high. Ever since then, we've basically just been trading down. And we're currently at a price of $23. Now, the last time I made a video on Avalanche, it was quite a while ago. It was back in June. I think it was June 6th or June 3rd. I can't quite remember, but it was right before we broke down below this support. And in that video, I spoke a lot about the direction Avalanche could go, but how most likely it would trend downwards to a tune either similar to 2021, mid 2021, or how it did in August of 2020. Now, I put more weight behind the 2021 comparison just because even though this would have matched up better in the cycle, 2020 plus 4 years is now 2024, where we roughly are, this was too early for Avalanche to have any kind of stable price. We can see that the price was basically all over the place over its first few weeks. And as a rule of thumb, I usually don't look at the first 2 months of an altcoin's or any kind of asset's price action. So I leaned more towards 2021, and would you believe it, that's more or less exactly what's been playing out so far. And for the last 2 months, we've basically been moving down. And funnily enough, I drew both these lines as a possibility. We've actually operated within both of them. So you could argue that we've got a blend of the two of them. Now, assuming that we do follow this trend for the foreseeable future for at least 1 or 2 months, we could potentially see a reversion by the end of the year. By this point, we will have most likely seen somewhere around 1 basis point cut. And if we pull up the basis points, the Federal Reserve, we can see that we are, of course, at 5.5 currently. If we take a look at previous all-time highs, we've noticed that Avalanche has put in its all-time highs a few months before we began to rate hike, when rates began to climb. And you could argue that we're seeing something similar play out right now with this local top that we got. While rates were flat, Avalanche did well enough, but as rates were approaching and as rates became more likely, Avalanche began to struggle, and with a rate cut more or less guaranteed this September, less than a day away, perhaps it's playing out similarly where it peaks out a few months just before rate cuts arrive. I don't think that's too far-fetched. One thing we have noticed though is that when rates are being raised, Avalanche struggles. Now, whether it struggles the same way when rates are being cut, I don't know. I still think we've got further down to go before we see some kind of reversion. Again, if we are on for a bull run, it will most likely take place either the beginning of next year or sometime in December. If we hit this line sometime before then, we are looking at a price of around $15 for Avalanche. And again, if we check how far of a fall that is, from current price, it's 40%. 40% sounds like a lot, but Avalanche has done that in a week. You know, it's done a 30% drop here. We've seen it make these moves very recently, very easily. And in fact, if we take this 3-week period here from this high to this low, would you believe 50% of a drop in 3 weeks? All we need is one more move like that, and it has to take place in the next 3 months. I think that's doable. I do think, though, that once we finally put in this ultimate low, once we have one final big scare, I think that's when things turn around. The reason we talk about this kind of December time frame, not only because a lot of other cryptocurrencies are pointing towards a December or a New Year bull run, it's also because last time Avalanche bottomed out 30 weeks after its halving. As simple as that. And that's when we went into the 2021 bull run, which again, the best bull run crypto has ever experienced. If we go 30 weeks out from our current halving, we can see it puts us end of November. And assuming, of course, that there's wiggle room here because nothing ever plays out the same, I think it's actually quite reasonable. If we actually check how far Avalanche has fallen in 15 weeks, so we'll take the halfway point, we can see it's made a drop of basically 40%. If we zoom in there, about 40%. So is it possible that we follow this trend and in another 15 weeks we drop not even that much, just 30%? I definitely think it's possible. In the case that we do drop here though, and then we do go into our bull run, let's talk a bit more hopefully. What does that mean potentially for Avalanche? Well, we've seen that the all-time highs for AVAX are about $150, but we moved up to that price from a low of $2. So the growth that we made from 2021 to the end of 2021 was phenomenal. I mean, it was absolutely bonkers, 5,000% of a move up. And while if we do return to this low, I wouldn't expect for a 5,000% move, but even if we get a 500% move, we are well in line with meeting our previous all-time high. That brings us up to just under $90. And to bring us to our all-time high from this low, it would be about 1,000% of a move. I think that's actually quite reasonable. To get 1/5 of the move that you got during your first bull run, that's still a 10x right there. Again, a problem with a lot of these altcoins, and the reason that they don't break above their previous all-time highs, is because first of all, you have a lot of people buying up at the top, and then they basically become bag holders, so as the price climbs up, they are selling into that price, and whereas here they never had bag holders. It was just basically straight up because nobody owned any Avalanche yet, they were just buying it as it went up. Now we have people who have been holding for 3 years and want to get rid of it. The other problem is it's a very strong psychological barrier. We never actually had a weekly close above $130. And we only actually had a few weeks where we were above $100. I'm counting 7 there. 7 weeks where we were above $100. It might sound like a long time, but 7 weeks is not long at all. And so if Avalanche was struggling to stay above that range during the best bull run in its entire existence, this 2025 bull run, I'm not saying it's going to be bad, but we're definitely not going to see the COVID stimulus that we saw back in 2021. So perhaps instead of hoping for new all-time highs, which is possible, I honestly don't know, you might want to sell a good portion of your Avalanche, maybe just below $100. I don't know, it's up to you. Anyway, looking at the Bitcoin chart, again, this chart is more or less the same from the previous video because I actually did a good job of calling what would happen. I made the comparison back to 2020 where we had the sell-off, the rally, and then another smaller sell-off. That's exactly what we saw again. Starting in 2022, we had this really long sell-off, really prolonged, a short recovery rally, like we saw here, short and sharp recovery rally up, and then another less severe but still strong sell-off in July of 2021, which funnily enough, we also kind of saw happen around a similar time frame in 2024, plus 3 years later. One thing I wanted to look at was that when we entered this kind of low value range of sub 3,500 Satoshis, it took us 9 weeks from when we first wicked into the range before we fully made a strong move out of it. Now, if we take a look at where we currently are, we can see that we've actually wicked into this range back at the end of July. Basically, 1st of August, we moved into this range. And if we take another 9 weeks forward, that puts us end of September, when we could potentially see a reversion on the Bitcoin pair. Now, when did we see this reversion? Back in 2021, this was around the July-August timeframes. Again, now we're looking at August-September timeframes, so pretty similar in terms of seasonality itself, and pretty similar in terms of the 3 major moves that we saw beforehand. The only key difference is that this first move lasted way longer than what we saw back here, but that's also because we just don't have the data before this. Funnily enough, if we turn on rate points again and see where the current rates are, we can see that it was, again, a few months before we got rate hikes that Avalanche peaked out on its Bitcoin pair, and we actually bottomed out a few months after we got our final rate hike in. And we can see this is pretty common across crypto. When we have flat rates, when rates are stable, when they're not fluctuating, when there is less uncertainty, assets do usually at least start to perform well. Now, what's interesting with this is that we did start to basically capitulate well in advance of getting our first rate cut. And I do just think that that is basically down to Avalanche being an extremely risky asset compared to traditional finance and even the crypto space. Avalanche compared to Bitcoin is much riskier. And so during times of high basis points, Avalanche will just struggle against Bitcoin. We've seen that throughout history with plenty of other altcoins. It's just not unusual. And even Solana is still below its all-time highs on its Bitcoin pair. It didn't break above them. So it does just go to show that even though you can have an altcoin that performs amazingly, it still is technically losing to Bitcoin in the long run. If we take a look though at what Avalanche did after we got out of this range, we can see it rallied up approximately 700% against Bitcoin. Now again, if you want to assume we're going to get a similar move, which I think is risky to be honest with you, But let's just say for the sake of things that we do get, say, a 650% move, we'll make it 600 to keep numbers easy. If Bitcoin wants to do a 2x from now to its all-time high, you're expecting Avalanche to do a 12x, which I don't think is too unreasonable, definitely possible, but it's also equally not as possible. I want to keep this video short, so thank you very much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike too. That's totally fine. Consider clicking my face over here to check out the channel, or you can just click this video up here if you want to see more content that Google thinks you want to watch. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. Take care and peace.